Hi everybody and greetings. I want to give an introduction to the material on pitfalls and evaluation. So the word pitfalls might be a little misleading, but what it's essentially talking about are criteria, factors, issues that we look at systematically across different program evaluations to draw some conclusions about the accuracy and the integrity of the studies that other evaluators have performed. And really, the pitfalls that are identified in the material for this week are core issues that underlie the study of social science research designs, which again is the method of how we collect data and how we draw conclusions about the ways that people behave in the real world. Because people are different than elemental properties in biology or physics, people are unique in how they behave, and so we study them in a systematic way as set up in social science research method designs. And that's what we're applying in program evaluation. So there are 5 issues that come out of the readings, 5 pitfalls that can be used to evaluate different program evaluations. And this is particularly important because these 5 issues should be integrated into your evaluation critiques that are due on Thursday. So I'm going to talk through each of these briefly, try to give you some examples, and I hope that you'll contact me if you have any other questions. So the first point here is measurement validity. And measurement validity has to do with how accurately our data sources measure the thing that we want to talk about. So if I'm trying to study student learning and all I have are questions about whether students liked a program, well, there may be some questions as to whether my measures actually capture student learning. You know, the students say they like the class, but did they actually learn something? So it challenges us to think about the ways that we collect data, that we analyze issues in order to accurately measure what it is that we really care about. So for the YWA study, we're studying student learning, student change, the way that these students are changing their perceptions about science and math based on their involvement in these workshops, after school programs. And so we measure them in multiple ways. We measure them through these attitudinal questions about science and math. And we measure them also by survey questions about their feelings about whether or not they want to go to college. So these are all perceptual measures, they're all attitudinal measures, but they give us multi-dimensions for trying to understand how the lives or how the behaviors and the perceptions of these young people may or may not have changed based on their involvement in these workshops. So the reliability of our measures is based on how well we can draw a connection between what it is we're studying and what it is we want to talk about. And so ideally, measurement validity comes up early on in a study because we have to be thinking about how we're going to measure these issues that we're told are important. But it also plays a factor in our analysis of data because we may need to tone back some of the language we use in talking about what our conclusions are based on the limitations of the data that we have in front of us. In other words, I can't talk about scholarly achievement of these young people based on the survey data. I don't have data on their grades or data on, say, for example, their college acceptances. Obviously, that'll come much later, but I can only talk about the measures that I have. So reliability is about creating measures or identifying measures that relate to what it is you want to study. And it's also about toning down or refining how you talk about your study based on the measures you have available. It's drawing that connection between your data and the interpretation of what that data means. The other term that's often used with measurement reliability is the word operationalization. How do I operationalize my survey measures or my other data measures? Which means, how do I relate what I'm measuring to the concept or idea that I want to know more about? So in economic analysis, perhaps if you're studying economic development, you would ask questions of how are you operationalizing economic growth in the community. Maybe it's the number of new businesses opened, or it's the GDP per capita, or you need to have some measure for actually defining economic growth, and the link between what economic growth means and the measures you have to draw from define your measurement reliability. Validity. Measurement validity. So measurement reliability has to do with consistency. That has to do with how consistently you measure the same thing across participants or across time. And so in our survey data, we have high reliability because the same survey questions are asked of all the students. So there's no difference among the actual questions. So reliability is just measuring the same thing consistently. This can be a problem when you're dealing with larger scale studies and perhaps you have some missing data, like missing years of data, or we've talked about attrition and maturation of your participants. If you're studying people over long periods of time where you're collecting data from them yearly or even more frequently, and you're missing some of that data, that could also interrupt your reliability. The next concept is internal validity. This has to do with the accuracy of your analytic procedures. I talked a little bit about some of the statistical procedures that we use in data analysis, in program evaluation, like difference regression analyses, or a regression discontinuity design, or two-sample t-test. The accuracy and the integrity of those models themselves define our internal validity. So internal validity is about how accurately we're drawing conclusions from our data analysis. Similarly, with qualitative analysis, it would be the conclusions we draw about common themes among what interviewees are saying, or common patterns in the textual documents that we are analyzing, and the extent that we're able to prove that those patterns or those connection among patterns accurately exist. And generally, we achieve this type of integrity, this type of internal validity, by our transparency, how we put together our mathematical models and actually execute them, how we define model fit in regression analysis. It's really essentially the transparency of our analytic procedure. Similarly with qualitative analysis, being open and transparent about the type of codes we used in the qualitative data and the steps that we took as researchers to move from one stage of the analysis to the next. And so external validity has to do with how we relate the findings from our study to other contexts that we have not studied. And so a simple, easy lesson here is that the bigger your study, the more data, the more years of time that you have considered, generally the stronger and the overall better your ability to generalize or relate your findings to other contexts. So we are studying, many of us, I know not all groups, but many of the groups are studying these students in the YWCA program. So this is a unique program, and we are going to be able to determine the extent that this particular after-school program is affecting student perceptions about science and math and their attitudes towards going to college and some other factors related to their learning and personal development. Let's say that somebody comes to us and say, okay, how do I take the conclusions from what you've studied among these particular students in this particular community in El Paso and relate it to after-school programs in STEM education in Houston? Or look at some after-school programs in STEM education in another state like New York State. We cannot generalize our findings to any other context, but we can certainly draw conclusions based on our analysis that can inform future research and future study in other jurisdictions across the United States. This has to do with how big our sample is and the characteristics of our sample and the characteristics of a sample that we want to generalize to. So external validity really challenges us to think about what it is that we've concluded from our study and how that may or may not relate to studies of young people and after-school STEM programs in other contexts. And I'll talk more about this when we get together on Thursday. So that's my main summary of the material for this week. A couple of reminders. If you have not already, email me your group for the final project. Thanks to everyone who's already done this. Thanks to everyone who's already done the IRB training, who obviously wanted to do that. For Thursday, please bring, if you're working on the YWCA data, please bring it with you on your computer. Bring computers to class on Thursday. If you're not working with that, bring a data set you're interested in, or download one of the ones that I have up on Blackboard. I'll have those available the day of too. And remember to bring your computer on Thursday, because we're going to actually go through some real basic steps of analyses. And I will probably even try some regression analyses with the data, so that you can see how we can begin working with a set like this to draw relevant conclusions, again, related to discovery and related to cause-effect relationships. So thanks very much. Contact me if you have any questions. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to your discussion board and to reconnecting with you all on Thursday.